Jason from Melbourne Muscular Therapies here. I've tailored a program for people who suffer reoccurring hamstring issues. So if you're someone that suffers strains, tendonitis, tendinopathy of the hamstring, this is going to be a program designed for you. So some of the common causes that present with people who have these issues is that they've got a weak glute max, so your main bum muscle is weak, or you might have a hamstring that is tight, long and weak. So for instance, the hamstring is stuck in a lengthened position and it's also weak. So a lot of people think that a tight hamstring is only short, but hamstrings can actually be stuck in a lengthened position. So someone that might present with either of these issues could typically have an anterior pelvic tilt. So your pelvis is tilted down at the front, like so. So your quads and your lower back are tight, pulling that pelvis out of the position. So when you're in that anterior pelvic tilt, your glute max, first of all, can't contract properly. So it can't drive you into hip extension. So instead of that, you might start to overstride and recruit too much of your hamstrings. And so that's what could cause them to strain. Or if you're in that in that tilted position, your hamstrings are stuck long and they're weak. So if you think of an elastic band and you stretch it, and then you keep stretching it and it forms a weak spot, and then if you give it a sudden contraction when it's already tight, that band will snap. So that's like your hamstring. Your hamstring's stuck in a lengthened position. So say in a sport or an activity where you're running along at a constant pace, that's the hamstring lengthening, and then you are required to sprint or exert a lot of energy through that hamstring. It contracts hard, and that's when you get the tear or the strain in the hamstring, is because it's too weak to get that contraction and that load through the area. So this program is going to be 8 body weight exercises that you can complete at home. So it's like a stepping stone from moment of injury to progressing you back into more functional and foundational exercises like your deadlift and your squat. So this is a good rehab exercise program that'll get you back baseline strength. So it'll strengthen your hamstrings concentrically, so that shortening phase of the hamstrings, that's what we're going to target strengthening, and your glute max whilst going through that hip extension and that running motion. All right, the first exercise in the program is the simple pelvic thrust or glute bridge. So this exercise is also good for assessment. So it's a good assessment for if your glutes do actually activate while going through hip extension and also requiring the hamstrings to contract. So if you can't feel your glutes going through this at the start, that's all right. That's just telling you that you need to keep working on it and get some activation in that glute. So you might need to consciously at the start think about squeezing your glutes as hard as you can to get that signaling going from the brain to the glute that it needs to contract. All right, so now I'll demonstrate the exercise for you. So first of all, with all of these exercises we're going to complete, you want to make sure that your feet are staying facing forward. So I'll face the camera to start with so you can see what I'm talking about. So we want to make sure that our feet are facing forward like that. So we don't want to have our feet turned out at all, as this is ingraining bad habits and habits that you don't want to be ingraining when you're running. Because when you're running, you want those feet facing directly forward and avoiding that turned out posture. Otherwise, you're going to start to recruit more of your lateral glute muscles rather than your glute max. All right, so feet hip width apart, facing directly forward. Then you're going to lie down on your back. First of all, we want to get out of that pelvic tilt. So if you can see my back there is arched. We want to tuck the bum down. So already that's going to activate your glutes, shorten your hamstrings a little bit, and we want to bring our rib cage down. So we want to pull our ribs down. So we don't want our ribs poking up as well, because if we're in that position, generally our back is going to be arched. So tuck the bum down, pull the ribs down, relax your head, and then what we're going to do is pushing through your heels. We're going to keeping in that position where you're tucked down, so posteriorly tilted, squeezing up, not into hyperextension, just into neutral glute extension, and then slowly back down, staying in that tilted position. So we want it to essentially, on the way down, you should roll your mid back, lower back, and then your glutes should be the last thing to touch. Okay, and then you're staying in that position, squeeze your glutes, back up, hold, slowly back down, roll the back down, touch, and up. Okay, so we're squeezing through the glute there, making sure the back's staying nice and flat. Hopefully you can see it there. So we're not coming down into that arch position, getting out of that anterior tilt. So squeeze up and slowly back down. So you can start off with, you might just do 10 reps and have a rest. You might build up to doing 3 sets of 10. Once you find that you're getting through that perfectly fine, you can start to even go up to doing 50 reps just to really make sure you're getting that glute burning, getting that glute activation and building up. Okay, so the next exercise is called a wall stride. So this exercise is going to work at, again, posteriorly tucking the pelvis, so getting out of that anterior tilt. It's going to work glute activation while also working hamstring concentric contraction, but we're going to add in a calf raise element to it as well, so replicating that running movement. So what you'll need is a wall. Then what you're going to do is similar type position to the pelvic thrust, lying down in your back. Get your feet up on the wall, hip width apart, facing directly forward again. And then we're going to get into that position. So tuck the bum down, so get out of that arch, tuck the bum down, pull the ribs down. Then we're just going to, with our feet, pulling down against the wall. So think you're tractioning the wall, pulling it down as hard as you can. So that's activating the hamstrings. Then we're just going to lift the bum off. That's going to work glute activation. You're going to bring one hip up. You can hold it or just leave it there and let your arms rest by your side. Then what we're going to add in is we're going to start to calf raise. So keeping pulling down against the wall as hard as you can, activating that hamstring, calf raise up, and then slowly back down. What you're focusing on with your foot, make sure that you're keeping contact with the ball of your big toe and the outside of your foot. So you don't want the foot rolling around too much. It's just coming up in a nice straight position. Keep the glute switched on here, hamstrings on, pulling down against the wall, and we're raising the calf up while this hip is in hip flexion. Pulling, calf raise, hold, squeeze that calf, back down. Pull, squeeze, activate glute, and back down. Alright, complete this exercise on both sides. Start with 10 reps, you might build up to doing 20, or you can do it for a time limit. You might go 15 seconds, then build up to 45 seconds. Just play around with it. You should start to feel good activation in your glute, in your hamstring, and get some activation in your calf. The next exercise is a single leg foam roller bridge, or if you don't have a foam roller, just use a weight plate or a rolled up towel or something that you can put your foot on. So what you're going to do, so you're going to place one foot on the foam roller or your weight plate, then you're going to go up into it, so you can see my heels are touching there, up into a calf raise, so push the heel up into the sky, flatten your back there, so again, posteriorly tilt, squeeze your glute, then we're going to bring one hip up, again hold that, I'll keep my arm out of the way for you, then we're locking that calf in, and then we're just going to lift the glutes off. So your lower back can stay in contact, we're just lifting that bum off the ground, lifting your hips up, holding. You can also pull back towards, so pulling your heel back towards yourself, that's going to concentrically contract that hamstring. Keep everything tucked, ribs down, abs on, glutes on here, I can feel it burning, hamstrings working, push that heel up into the air the whole time, alright, and just hold. So you can hold this one, again, start with 15 seconds, you might only get 5 seconds before your hamstring cramps, that's alright, and then you can build up to holding for maybe 45 seconds on each side, then relax down. So we're just holding, so the hips are off the ground, back's nice and flat on the ground, and that glute's activating. Alright, give that one a go. Okay, so the next exercise is a single leg pelvic thrust. So, same position as before, lying on our back, bum tucked down, so back's nice and flat. I'll get my arms out of the way, so bum's down, ribs are down. Then what we're going to do is lift one leg up, keep that in line. You can start with it in line, then you can progress to holding it up into hip flexion. So keep it in line there, and then pushing through your heel, again, slowly contracting up and hold, not going into hip hyperextension there, so just hip extension and then control back to the ground. So make sure, big focus for this one is that you're not flopping back down. So squeeze the leg up, hold, control back to the ground. Hips should touch at the same side, so you shouldn't have an imbalance. One side coming down faster than the other, should touch in sequence. So squeeze up and slowly back down. Then a progression, if you find that one and you can't get any more out of it, what you're going to add in is a calf raise element. So same thing, lifting up and then add that calf raise in, back down, hips down. So keeping that posterior tilt, squeeze up, calf on, and back down. You should really start to feel that one burn. So start with just doing 5 on each side. You'll find that pretty hard, just doing 5 each side. Build up to doing 10 to 15 on each side. The next progression is moving to standing postures and standing exercises. So the first standing exercise is going to be a single leg isometric hold. So isometric holds are really good for strengthening your tendons and strengthening the muscles around a joint while holding a static position. So this exercise is going to be good for building stability around your knee, ankle and hip, while also strengthening the tendons. So that high hamstring tendon, it's going to help to strengthen the glute while holding a single leg stance. We're also going to be working the opposite hip flexor, which is what we want when we're running. We're working one glute and one hip. All right, so I'll move back so you can see what's going on. So starting foot facing directly forward, we're going to lift one hip up and hold this one in hip flexion. I'm going to move to facing this way so you can see what's going on with my posture. So lifting that hip up, tuck that bum down, so glute activation, hamstrings on, pull the ribs down just a little bit. So you should have a straight line from your ear, shoulder, hip, knee and ankle. Should all be in straight alignment. Alright, so we're lifting up and holding their glutes on. I'm squeezing that glute, ribs are down, so my abs are on, and we're just working on balance. You can add in a little bit of trunk rotation just over towards that the knee that's up. Alright, work on keeping the balance of your foot. So balance should be evenly distributed over your big toe, ball of your foot and the outside of your foot. And we're working to keep this hip flexor as high as you can. Alright, so here I can feel my glutes on, my hamstrings on, my foot stabilizers are on, and I can feel this hip flexor working. So start off just holding for 30 seconds, see if you can get to 30 seconds, 45, a minute, and then the absolute goal should be aiming to hold this for 3 minutes on each side. Alright? The next exercise is what we call ground tension. This is a good exercise for strengthening the hamstrings concentrically and working that glute going into extension, but holding that isometric position. Okay, so we're moving back. We're going to start in our sprint stance. So our measure for a sprint stance is we're kneeling down. Our knees should be in line with the toes, so our back knee should be in line with the front of our front toes. That's our measure there. So from side on, kneel down in line with the toes, stand up. That's your posture there for taking off to run. Alright, we're going to get the weight over this front leg so that knee stays bent and then this back leg's bent as well. Alright, we're leaning forward, opposite hand forward to the knee. Then what we're going to do is with that front leg first, we're pulling back against the ground. So using that hamstring and that glute, we're pulling back as hard as we can. So you're trying to pull the ground as hard as you can with that foot. So you should feel that hamstring and that glute light up. Then what we're going to do to counteract that is that back hip is going to push forwards. So we're ground tensioning, pulling and pushing as hard as we can. Keep those abs on as well, so suck your abs in, tuck your bum down slightly so we're posteriorly tilting, and rotate your torso over that front leg. And we're going to hold. Again, you can start off with holding for 30 seconds, build up to holding for a minute or 3 minutes is the goal. Alright, so you should start to get your legs shaking. So you're really pulling as hard as you can. Your legs should physically be shaking. I don't know if you can see it there on the camera, but my legs are shaking. I can feel this hamstring, this glute is burning. This hip flexor and quad are working as well. Alright, so aim for 3 minutes on both sides. Alright, so moving on, we've got the isometric lunges up next. So this is a good exercise for strengthening again around the ankle and the knee. So strengthening stability in that knee flexion position. You will get a little bit of the quads working in this exercise, but that's alright. And there's a few progressions and regressions you can add in as well to make it harder. Alright, so the measure for your iso lunge is your front knee at 90 degrees and back knee at 90 degrees. We're going to tuck the bum down, ribs down, So in that position that we're used to, posterior tilt, ribs are down, then we're going to just lift off a little bit, lift that back knee up, and then we're going to rotate slightly over that front knee. So from front on, tuck down, lift up, rotate slightly, and hold. You'll get burn on the quads. You can start adding ground tension, so pulling back against the ground on that front leg again. You're going to get a bit of hamstring engagement there. Pushing with the back leg, that'll get a bit more of that quad and hip flexor burning. You can even go the other way, push your front knee forwards and your back leg backwards. So spreading the floor, so that's a couple of variations. And then the last variation, so in that position, and then you're going to add in that calf raise and hold. Alright, so start off with 30 seconds. You'll find it pretty tough to get to 30 seconds. I struggled the first few times, but build up to a minute. And then the aim is to get to 3 minutes on each side. The final exercise in our program is what we call a functional glute. So this exercise is going to work to strengthen that glute and hamstring while we're going through a hip extension pattern as if we were replicating walking and running. So we're breaking down that pattern and making sure we can get the glute and hamstring firing as we're going through that motion. Alright, so our measure is the same as our ground tension, so our sprint start. So knee in line with our toes. We're going to turn side on, so knee in line with toes. Coming up from there, you're leaning your upper body forward, so your weight is on this front leg. So you should feel this glute really taking the load already. You're keeping your knee bent, okay? You don't want that knee locked out. So that knee's bent, not going forward over your toes, so that shin is pretty straight. This back leg is just lightly touching, and then we're going to start with our opposite arm forward. You can do this exercise with a TheraBand, or if you've got a pulley machine at home, have a light weight on that. So you can tie the TheraBand around something, or if you've got the pulley, using that. So you're going to start to row in with this arm just to have a bit of resistance. And then using this glute here, we're pushing up, so we're rowing in, that arm and leg are coming up at the same time, holding at the top for 3 to 5 seconds to get balanced. And then we're going to slowly push that arm and leg back and touching lightly on the ground. So the weight is staying over this front leg, so I can feel this glute working. And then we're coming up and holding again. Slowly pushing back. So it's a bit like a hip hinge type movement. We're just in that split stance. So really loading up that glute and really feel it working. Coming up nice and tall. Hold that isometric position and then back down. This is also a good assessment. If you find that your calf is overworking and you're not feeling it in your glute, that's just showing that you're probably struggling with balance through the foot, or you're gripping too hard with your foot and your calf, and your glute's not activating correctly. So if you're running, you're getting tight in the calves as well. That's showing that your calf is overworking for that glute. So you might need to regress, go back to the previous exercises, and work on a bit more to make sure that glute's firing. It will take a little bit of time to get this one right. So the first few times, if you do feel it in the calf, try and keep going through that and start to see if you can really get it going solely or mostly in the glute, a bit in the hamstring, and not much in the calf. Alright, so you can start off with trying to do 10 reps on each side. You might do 2 or 3 sets. You can eventually build up to maybe doing 15 reps as well, just to really start to fatigue that glute and coming up. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed the program. If you have been suffering reoccurring hamstring strains and injuries, give this program a go. It'll be a good guide to get you back to doing more functional training and get you back into running. Thank you.